settlements and resettled in temporary accommodations. That ain't free. That ain't free. It's costing Israel billions of dollars. And that 70,000 who, they had jobs up there, which means they're working, they're producing, there's taxes, the economy kind of stuff. They're here now. They ain't working. They ain't producing. They're just sucking up resources. It's a huge, huge, giant, gutting of the Israeli economy. The same thing out of what Hamas is doing in the settlements in Negev. People tens of thousands had to be relocated. Man, this is a giant hole in the Israeli economy, and it's unsustainable. On top of that, 300,000 reservists. You know what a reservist is? It's a working man. It's a guy who has a job. He has a family. He is participating in the Israeli economic experience. And now he's not. Now he's in the reserves where he's getting a paycheck because they have to pay him, but he's not producing anything. That job is gapped. Whatever he was doing in the Israeli economy ain't happening right now. And billions of dollars. So what Hezbollah is doing, what the Houthi are doing, the economic impact on this is destroying the Israeli economy, destroying it. And this is unsustainable for Israel. So this alone is prompting the Israelis to say, we have to resolve this fight. You got people like Gallant. I think he's the Minister of Defense right now. What a character, with his genocidal talk. But he's talking about we're going to take it to them. Gallant knows, though, and so does the Israeli Defense Force, that if Israel were to open up a second front against Hezbollah, that Hezbollah will take Galilee, that northern Israel will fall. Because Hezbollah's got 80,000 guys. Many of them, most of them perhaps, are combat hardened. That means they've been fighting in that, the Syrian conflict. These guys know war. They're very well trained, very well equipped, very well motivated, and they have a plan. If you think the Hamas plan that was executed on October 7th was innovative, you haven't seen anything yet. Hezbollah has a plan to take northern Israel, and they will take northern Israel, and there's nothing Israel can do to stop it, which is a nightmare. So nobody wants escalation. So in a way, because we can't afford to escalate, the United States can't afford to escalate, Israel can't afford to escalate, you make it even, you give the people who are putting the pressure on you even more latitude because they know you don't want to escalate. So they're going to push the envelope even more and create more and more pressure. And that's what's happening right now. This is the untold aspect of this war, but it's this aspect that's probably going to promote, the collapse of Israel more so than just Hamas defeating Israel in Gaza.
Yeah, and maybe lastly on this, do you feel like the confluence of these various aspects of Israel's brutal onslaught and what it's produced, both in its troubles with fighting Hamas on its own terrain and the fact that that there is an axis of resistance that has been managing a conflict escalator that is prepared to move up. Do you feel like, given that Biden has given this deadline, that Israel will actually follow it? Because Israel's capacity for rational military and political behavior, especially since the aftermath of October 7th, appears to have diminished nearly to non-existence. I'm curious on your thoughts about that.
I mean, it's a tough political question here in America because of the control that the Israeli lobby has over everything. Congress, the presidency, the media, the spin. So it's an uphill struggle to get America to, change its policy regarding Israel. In the past, it was Israel can do no wrong. We support Israel no matter what. But we're now paying a price for that. And so I do believe you're going to see pressure being put on Israel. I think Netanyahu is finished. I think he's going to go. I think Biden is going to make it clear that continued American support of Israel is contingent upon a change in the Netanyahu government. We pretend that it doesn't mean Netanyahu is going to go, but if you dissolve this right-wing coalition, then Netanyahu can't continue as prime minister because it's consensus-driven. He has to get a ruling coalition. He won't be able to. Somebody else will step in and take over, and that's what we want. But here's the danger of all this, Danny. Here's the problem. And we got to be honest about this, because right now we're being lulled into a false sense of complacency. Hamas is kicking ass. There's no doubt about it. Hamas will not be defeated. But who likes Hamas? Does Egypt like Hamas? Nope. Does Jordan like Hamas? No. Does Syria like Hamas? Not really. They were just at war with them a couple of years ago. They tolerate Hamas. Turkey? Yeah, Turkey likes Hamas, but not that much. Not enough to go to war for them. And the further we get away, you realize that Hamas is very unpopular. And if we just erase the term Hamas and insert the term Palestinian, let's be honest, nobody cares about the Palestinians. There's a whole bunch of demonstrations taking place right now, but these are cause-effect demonstrations, meaning that if it weren't for the slaughter of the Gazans, these demonstrations wouldn't be happening. These people aren't going to go into the streets and demonstrate on behalf of a two-state solution or a one-state solution or a free Palestine. They're demonstrating because the bombing's happening. So what happens when the bombs stop falling, when the genocide stops? Are these people going to continue to be out there putting the pressure on the United States? Is the United States going to continue to feel isolated, or is it going to go back to what it was, where people say, wait a minute, so they've stopped, we don't have to turn on TV and look at dead Palestinian babies anymore? Oh, thank God. So let's get back to what we were doing, which is chugging along with normal economic activity where the Palestinians are problematic. We don't want to do it. And so the danger here is that all the sacrifice that the Palestinians have made, and believe me, they are making the suffering they're doing through, and you see there's a growing recognition amongst them that they have to do this. This is their burden to pay to get statehood, that all of that will be for naught, because there will be a desire to, we don't want to embarrass Israel. We don't want to humiliate Israel. We're going to look for a compromise solution where we have a moderate Israeli government who will return to giving lip service to, reviving Oslo, but never really being serious about reviving Oslo. And gradually the Palestinians will be forgot again. I'm afraid that's the direction that we're heading. And so, it's imperative that the international community find a way to sustain this pressure, because change will happen, because the United States feels the pressure. I mean, when we start turning on Israel, the pressure is working. All right. But the problem is, let's say we get Israel to change, the fighting stops in Gaza. Now the United Nations comes in with their, because the UN doesn't like the Palestinians either. I mean, nobody likes the Palestinians. They've been getting screwed by everybody forever. And so you start turning it over to these old institutions, and it's forgotten. The only one out there articulating right now for the Palestinians seriously is Iran. And here's where the hope is, because Iran has good relations with two nations who are the nemesis of the United States in the geopolitical arena, Russia and China. And Russia and China have historically kept sort of a hands-off approach to the Palestinian issue. But I think Russia and China, I think they do care about the Palestinians. There's a genuine concern. You see, Putin articulating things that no Western leader has ever articulated about what Israel is doing, criticizing Israel. And China is talking about getting engaged. And it's in China's interest to take advantage of what's going on to expand. Because what is Gaza going to need? Infrastructure development. Who's pretty good at that? China. So it's an opportunity for China. It also, if you keep pushing the necessity of a Palestinian state to resolve this Arab-Israeli conflict, you keep putting pressure on the United States too. What the United States wants to do is quickly get back to, even though Biden says that we won't be returning to October 6th, I guarantee you all the U.S. wants to do is get back to October 6th. That's all we want to do. we're not looking forward to any of this innovative political stuff in the Middle East. It scares us. Russia and China, on the other hand, are looking forward to something like that. So I'm not giving up hope for the Palestinians, but I am saying that all this stuff that we're seeing, all this pressure, these votes at the UN, that can disappear that quick. And you know it. You know it can, because we're not talking about, a deep foundation of love for the Palestinians out there in the world. We don't like seeing dead Palestinian kids. So people are rallying to the cause of Palestine. But when the kids stop dying, will that support for Palestine still be there? And that's the big question.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a big question, and I share your sentiment about where the hope is, because yes, Iran is indeed a very serious actor when it comes to supporting Palestine, and I think you're exactly right. Both Russia and China, when it comes to this region, see the Palestine question as both one of course, standing for international law. That's what Russia and China like to do. They like to promote it because it's within their interests. Most stable, rational countries who are thinking about both their own development and what's good for the world in terms of their own development. It's stability. It's peace. It's not having this massive conflict, which could lead that's genocidal in nature, that could lead to a very hot war between most countries in the region. That is an ultimate disaster for Russia and China. So, of course, this Palestine question is so important to not just stabilize, but also, Russia and China are the only countries outside of the region, for the most part, outside of some outliers that don't have the same kind of influence. But the biggest countries that do support a Palestinian state, and legitimately do, not giving lip service like Blinken does when, he says we're for we're for this two-state solution, and then, green lights the absolute eradication of it that Israel is pursuing. Both Russia and China actually do support this.
Yeah, and look, we are living in an age of geopolitical transformation. I mean, it sounds very academic. It sounds like geopolitics 201. Your junior level course in college for that international relations degree. But it's real and it's happening, and it's in many ways it's exciting, but in many ways it's scary, because we collectively, the world, have for so long grown accustomed to American hegemony. We can talk about how we're opposed to it, and everybody's like, we're against American imperialism, we're against hegemony, we're against the rules-based international order. Of course you are, except you're not, because you are for stability. And while there is a whole bunch of instability in the world out there, there's a whole bunch of stability that's brought about by this. And people are lulled into a false sense of complacency by the perception of stability. And right now, where this transformation that's taking place from the American singularity to this global multipolarity, BRICS and all that stuff, it scares people, because it means you have to put your faith and your trust in something else. Now, if you're somebody who has been disrupted by the American singularity, yeah, you're ready to jump ship. But if you're somebody whose life has been chugging along in relative comfort, it's a scary proposition, a frightening proposition. So it's not, automatic logic where people say, well, America's failed, so we're going to jump on the Chinese and the Russian ship. Well, for many places in the world, America hasn't failed. We didn't get to be number one because we're a bunch of losers. Okay, we did some things right, and we bullied our way to the top, whatever you want to say. But America is a very powerful nation that has a lot of successes attached to it. And a lot of people around the world found those successes attractive, especially the political and economic elites who make money off the American singularity. And so this idea that we're just going to seamlessly transfer power over to the Russians and the Chinese, that ain't going to happen. This is a very scary time. And it would be scary if this transformation was taking place in a conflict-free environment. But now we start throwing in the not only the reality of war, but what's that biblical statement? Rumors of war. There will be rumors of war. There will be wars and rumors of war. So, we have real war, but we have rumors of war too, potential of conflict that is generated by the friction that comes from this transformation. It scares the crap out of me. And I think it scares the crap out of just about anybody who's out there because, is the United States willing to go gently into that good night? Dylan from Dylan Thomas here. Or are we going to rage against the dying of the light? And my fear is that we're going to rage, and we're going to lash out, and we're going to create problems. We're going to make as much friction as possible rather than doing the smart thing, which is to smoothly transition and take an important seat at the table of multipolarity. We're going to resist that for as long as possible. And the consequences aren't just going to be economic and political disruption, but it can be, chaos and conflict as well. So as much as it makes sense for Russia and China to step into this Palestinian, crisis and be the leaders to get us out, it's just not that easy. America's not going to give up the role that it's enjoyed for the last, 40, 50 years as the lead influencer in the Middle East region. We're not going to, hand that mantle over to Russia and China willingly. So there's a lot of disruptive capacity out there, a lot of mischief for America to cause, going forward.
Yes, indeed, and perhaps we can close the program on this. You wrote a couple of articles in the last couple of weeks. One of them is for Energy Intelligence. You wrote about, is the U.S. still an essential nation? And you also wrote for RT recently an article about the U.S. military's multi-trillion-dollar fraud. And there were a lot of interlocking, very interconnected points about everything that you just stated. And so I wanted to ask you to close here, with regard to these developments. You are also trying to build a campaign, waging peace. You're trying to develop a film. And I'll pull all of this stuff up as you're talking. Given that the United States is spending so much on its military, and all of its maneuvers and its leadership are committed to these maneuvers, point to a pretty disastrous conflict that you say with Russia, with China, and you also have this unresolved and with what's gone on with Israel's onslaught in Gaza, obviously still a very relevant point, the Middle East or West Asia, that is still very much a possibility of potential hot conflict. Given all of this, I mean, one, how do you feel like your film Waging Peace will contribute to helping the United States become a more rational actor on the world stage? And two, where do you see this going? Do you see, because on the one hand we have the United States' belligerence is so clear for all of us, but on the other hand there are some pretty stark barriers, a lot of money being spent, not a lot of wars being won, and that could very well lead to massive changes in its own right. So I'll kick it to you while I pull up your materials.
Well, I'm old school American, I guess I will say, is that I have faith in the system. I know if I glance over to the comments, I'm probably going to be eviscerated for saying that. How could you have faith in the system? How can you? Look, if I don't have faith in the system, if I don't believe in the potential of this country, then what the hell do I believe in? I mean, America doesn't exist. It's not, it's not a viable entity. And I'm not willing to go down that route. So I hold out hope that the American people will be able to be awakened by all that's happening around him. I wrote this article in RT, and one of the things I talk in there is about the fact that the United States has grown so accustomed to throwing money at the Department of Defense because we just assumed that if we funded it, then America will be able to win every war in the world. And what the American people are finding out is that not only could we not defeat the Taliban, not only could we not defeat Al-Qaeda, We can't beat Russia, China. We can't beat anybody. We can't beat Iran. We don't have the ability to do this. And yet we're spending all this money. And so I think there's a growing sense of betrayal. And the idea of, America being the essential nation, we can't be the essential nation when we don't allow ourselves to be essential. I mean, essential means useful. Over and over and over again. Hamas has studied the terrain, the new terrain, the collapsed terrain. They've picked their vantage points, and they just wait for the Israelis to come in and fill that hole, fire, kill, run, get out of the way, move. Normally, you'd show videos. I mean, unfortunately, everybody does it. When you kill your enemy, you put their bodies out and you lay them out and you go, well, we killed these attackers here. This is how. Israel's not showing any Hamas bodies, are they? When was the last time Israel said, here's all the Hamas guys we've been killing? Because they ain't killing that many Hamas guys. They're killing a lot of Palestinian civilians. They're rounding up men and claiming they're Hamas, even though they're not. They're teachers, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're this, but they're not the Hamas fighters. The Hamas fighters, now I'm not saying Hamas isn't losing people. They are. But Israel isn't slaughtering them. And Hamas is adapting to this battlefield where they have freedom of movement below the ground, and they're able to pick their places above the ground and inflict horrific losses on the Israelis. And as the Israelis become more scared, more undisciplined, they're making more mistakes and they're losing more people. The way you survive in warfare is to have your head on a swivel. I mean, you got to be looking this way. You got to have situational awareness. You got to be well trained. You got to
like
have
on the football field. Like on the football field,
absolutely,
right? If you're looking wrong, they can't do it no more in the NFL. But in the old days, if you're looking the other way and there's a turnover and you didn't realize it, and now you're a blocker, you find yourself, somebody's gonna plant themselves right between your. That was the goal, to find somebody looking the other way and just.
The hits I made in college on special teams against guys who weren't looking would have got me permanently evicted from football today but they were clean hits back then. But, situational awareness, and yes, you have to trust your teammates. You have your job to do, and you have to. You can't worry about what's going to happen in this sector. You just have to assume that your teammates doing that job. Well trained. That's gone. The Israelis are not well trained. They're not. It's a reserve force. They're not that good. They're poorly disciplined. These guys. If you take a look at what they're doing in terms of mocking the Palestinians and so, that's the sign of a poorly disciplined force. Their goals are revenge, but revenge only takes you so far, because revenge works, until you step in the ring with Mike Tyson and then he hits you and you realize that, oh God, this revenge thing ain't so good anymore because I'm getting the crap beat out of me. Hamas is just sitting there beating the living crap out of the Israeli Defense Force. But it's not just Hamas. Hezbollah. Again, Israeli defense personnel speaking to Haaretz, a Israeli newspaper, have said that Hezbollah, it's not just, because Israel likes to say, we're going to, put the fight into southern Lebanon and make Hezbollah pay a price. What the Israelis have said is Hezbollah has taken over operational control of northern Israel, that Hezbollah is dictating the terms of engagement in northern Israel. They are dictating Israeli activity inside northern Israel. And if you think Hamas has tunnels, I'm here to tell you right now that if this fight expands, you're going to see Hezbollah fighters popping up in places in northern Israel nobody's imagined. They're going to be seizing Israeli towns, Israeli villages. They're going to be launching operations on the ground into Haifa. They'll be hitting the Israelis where they ain't. It'll be a completely different war than the one that the Israeli Defense Force has envisioned, and the Israeli Defense Force is recognizing this, and this is why they're telling Netanyahu, do not go to war with Hezbollah. We will get our asses handed to us. That's the fact. The Houthi, there's no solution to the Houthi. I mean, they what they're doing is just stunning. But it's a reflective of the reality of modern warfare, where these minor military forces, when given advanced military technology, can equalize the military equation. The mighty U.S. Navy with the Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier battle group can't control the Red Sea passage. The Houthi, and what it means is that we can't control the Strait of Hormuz. You remember when the U.S. said, hey, everybody, don't worry about Iran. We're the U.S. Navy. We're going to come rolling in there and we're going to guarantee that the Strait of Hormuz will be open. Well, guess what the Houthi just proved? That that's a bunch of malarkey. That when Iran wants to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, it's shut down permanently. We can't do anything about it because our aircraft carrier will be sunk before it gets there. All of our ships will be sunk before they get there. The Persian Gulf is a giant death trap for the U.S. Navy. That's what modern technology means. And the Houthi just proved that because the U.S. government, U.S. Navy had to back down from, Lloyd Austin. I forget, was it Prosperity Guardian?
Yeah, right.
Guardian Prosperity or something, Guardian Prosperity, Coalition of the Willing, all coming together. Everybody else went, not so fast. We don't want to be part of this. We don't support what you're doing with Israel and Gaza. So we don't want to be a part of this. Plus, what happens if this expands and Iran come in? Have you thought about the consequences? Of course, America hasn't thought about the consequences. Garland, we can't do anything. Israel's getting beat tactically, operationally, and strategically. Netanyahu's days are numbered. I think that he will be forced out of office in the very near future because he's failing across the board. He hasn't succeeded at anything. A huge embarrassment on October 7th. He was going to be the war leader that led the counterattack. His Israeli Defense Forces being humiliated in Gaza. They're impotent against Hezbollah. They can't do anything against the Houthi. Their economy is in tatters because of nothing's coming in to the port and Elliot and the 70,000 displaced from the north, 20,000 displaced from Gaza. That's 90,000 people in the middle that have to be cared for. No economic activity, no hope in sight. It's over. Israel lost. I mean, there'll be some fighting, screaming, kicking, and dying to go, but Israel can't win. They can't achieve the objective of destroying Hamas politically and militarily. Hamas is emerging from this stronger than it ever was. It literally, militarily, they're humiliating the Israeli Defense Force, humiliating them as we speak. Politically, Hamas is more popular today than it's ever been. If there was an election today amongst the Palestinian people, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank, Hamas is estimated to win between 71 and 76% of the vote. The Palestinian Authority has no legitimacy anymore, moral legitimacy. Israel thinks that they're going to be able to move forward with the Palestinians without a Hamas presence. Dream on. Hamas has been empowered. They're here. They're not going anywhere. It's Israel that's going to change. Netanyahu will be out. His coalition will crumble, and Israel's going to have to pick a leadership that's going to have to learn to deal with the new reality of the world.
Scott, I think in what we've seen in the last couple of years, power is only power until you use it, then it becomes force. And once you use force, you become exposed. It's like a punch. I always say this, the worst thing you can do oftentimes is throw a punch, because if you miss, you're open. Or if you throw a punch and somebody traps it against you, blocks it, your arm's out here being blocked, throwing a punch, taking that assertive move, you better win. Because if you miss, people will make you pay, right?
Or if you hit and they go,
yeah. And now they know, oh my gosh, they ain't scared of you anymore. So
you didn't knock them out.
You're better off to continue to intimidate and scare people than to act, because then they find out if you're real or not. Here's my point. We've found out more about what modern warfare in the last 2 years. Here's what we know. Missiles rule. Right? I don't care what you got. If you can't stop a Kinzhal hypersonic coming in, whatever you got is done. It's doomed. It's finished. What we found out is drones rule. You know what I mean? Every way, shape, or form, people are now using drones. Yep. Men can't concentrate in big groups or they're going to be blown to hell. Right? It appears to me that the U.S. Navy is kind of worthless, because you got now the kinds of missiles that we have. Oh, I mean, they say, oh, we blocked this missile, or this missile came at us, right? But if you send a salvo with 30 missiles, you overwhelm them. You know what I mean? So little Yemen can throw a missile or a drone here and there, and the U.S. Navy can say, we intercepted 12 missiles of this drone. But if it's just even Hezbollah, a non-state actor, they can put enough missiles, good missiles at you. You can't block a salvo. You're going to hit, maybe go down. So the U.S. Navy, it is not the intimidating force that it's a vulnerability and a liability that they're figuring, how far do we have to stay from the combat zone to be out of range of modern day missiles? The ground forces, we don't have the numbers to put ground forces on the air. There's now S-400s. There's now anti-aircraft stuff all over. The nature of war in the last 2 years has been what the American planners and militaries thought was the nature of war has been blown to hell in the last 2 years. Your thoughts?
No, you're 100% correct. Again, when I was in the Marine Corps, we did combined arms warfare, maneuver warfare. And it was premised on the notion that we weren't going to take Iwo Jima type casualties anymore. We didn't want to build any more monuments to dead Marines, that we're going to fight smarter. And so we combined, tactical skill, operational audacity with, technological superiority, or in some cases supremacy, that we were going to be better equipped, better trained, better prepared to carry out war. And gosh, I think Operation Desert Storm sort of proved that way of fighting against the world at that time, the fourth largest army in the world in Iraq, we dominated them. But Iraq didn't have the same weapon set that we had. They didn't have the technology that we had. We dominated. What would have happened if Iran had a whole bunch of Javelin missiles? And now we start coming in with our mass tank formations, and the Iranians go, poof, or the Iraqis go, poof, 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 poof. And all of a sudden, bam, there goes one, bam, there goes one, bam, there goes one, bam. And before we even advanced 300 meters into the enemy defense lines, we've lost 10% of our armor force. We moved to 500 meters, we've lost 20%. And suddenly we run out of steam. We're now in a death trap. They hit us with other things, and we have to pull back, losing 50, 60% of our armor force. That's why you're not seeing big aero operations between Russia and Ukraine today, because the lethality of the system. Take a look at the tactics. No more hey diddle diddle straight up the middle. No more big armor push through. Man, the way they fight today is they come in with small groups of infantry dispersed, backed up by one or two tanks with electronic warfare and air defense positioned. Why? Drones. Drones have changed the way of the war and the way of the world. And drones have become the nemesis for those Javelin crews, because it used to be, if you're a Javelin crew, I'd have my, forward observers out there looking for you. You pop off, I'll try and call in mortars or artillery to suppress you, but you already killed the tank and then you displace, it's tough game. Now you're a Javelin crew, and all of a sudden this little little mini rotor thing comes up and stares at you. You're screwed. It now saw you. So it's either going to adjust fire on you, and there ain't nothing you can do to get away. You run over to this position, it sees you, or it's going to call in its buddy drone, the FPV, the first-person view kamikaze drone with a big old chunk of high explosive on it. Boom! It got you. So you can't have your everybody's underground now. If you take a look at the Ukrainian defensive positions, they're all underground. Every once in a while they pop up to look, but then they go underground. Why? Because if a drone sees you, you're going to die. The drone's going to come in and blow up your bunker, blow you up. Warfare's changed. You can't. I could not survive on the battlefield using the training that I had. I could not employ a Marine rifle platoon or rifle company using the tactics that I had learned, because they would be slaughtered by drones. The reality of it is we have to disperse more, smaller teams of infantry working, with armor, small groups. You can't put a large amount of tanks together. They die. You have to come in penny packets. The war has changed, but it's still very lethal. You don't lose 500,000 guys like the Ukrainians have, from pinpricks. It's lethal because of the massive firepower that's still brought in on it. It's just different kind of firepower, different kind of war. It's changed completely. But drones are the revolutionary. We talk about, what was the big weapon of World War I? The machine gun. The machine gun, you couldn't do Napoleonic advances against a machine gun. What was the big weapon of World War II? The tank. The big weapon today? Drones. Drones have fundamentally changed the way we fight wars today. And if we're not prepared to do that, if we're not actively training to do that, if we're not, incorporating so the Israeli government has made a strategic decision to suppress casualty figures, so that they don't collapse the morale, the support of the Israeli people. I don't know what the true Israeli casualties are. I do know that the numbers they put out don't jive against the video evidence. Now, there's no guarantee. First of all, a lot of the explosions we see on these Israeli tanks are reactive armor. So you're going to get a nice big explosion that isn't necessarily resulting in a mobility kill or even damage. So it's, there's the likelihood is many of these explosions aren't, achieving a hard kill, and the troops inside are surviving intact. Maybe a little shooken up, going to have headache and hearing loss, but you're going to be okay. So you can't just sit there, well, because they hit all this is happening. No, these tanks are good tanks. They're survivable tanks. They're designed to do this, but they are losing a lot more tanks than this is why they had to stop reselling their old Merkava 3 tanks that they were going to sell to Morocco and others. They had to keep them because they have to organize new reserve armored battalions to make up for the losses that they're suffering in Gaza. But now this fight's turned into an infantry fight, and the Israeli infantry just isn't up to the task. I'm not, I'm an old fat man thousands of miles away from the battlefield, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I could do it any better than the Israelis. When I was younger, I could do it a hell of a lot better, and so could my Marines. These guys aren't very good. Russian people Russian commanders who fought in Mariupol, fought in Bakhmut, are looking at the Israeli tactics that they're using, and they're saying if they took this up against a real army, they'd all be dead. But they're not fighting they're fighting Hamas. It's a different kind of fight, but these aren't very good soldiers. They're not, they don't have the discipline. They can't. How can you be, let's just put it this way. If you're a 23-year-old major, you ain't very good.
You're right.
Okay. Major should be around, 32, 35, so that's a whole nother decade of experience you need to have before you're a major. If you're a 19-year-old sergeant, you ain't very good at all.
When I was I'll say this, in law enforcement, when I became captain, I was 36. And I was the youngest captain in the state of Maryland of all of the, various police departments that the state has. I was the youngest one. I got major at 38. And that was fairly young, right? Because it takes a lot of years just to know, for one thing, all the policies and procedures. What happens if this happens? You can't hold on, let me go get the manual. You have to know, if this happens, notify this person, do this, call this person. People are going to look at you. This happened. What do we do? You have to know that stuff, rote memory, right? You ain't going to learn that in a couple of years. So even in law enforcement, you're not going to find a bunch of captains and majors running around even in their late 20s. Usually it's their late 30s. The guys are going to have some gray starting to show up here before you start seeing those oak leaves and train tracks start to show up on their collar, right? So you can call somebody a major, but when you just stick them out there, and of course, in the rubble, let's be honest, if we're fighting in the rubble and I'm Hamas, I'm looking for oak leaves and stripes. I'm looking for the guy in that kind of environment. I'm looking for the people with rank to shoot first.
Well, you know why they have majors that are 23 years old? Because, look, I got promoted to captain when I was 28 years old. Okay, one thing I learned to become a captain is that the answer is staff sergeant. First thing, hey, Cap, what about this? Good question. Staff sergeant, hey, Gunny, come here. What's the answer to that question? Because I'm just 28. I may have captain rank, but I don't know. I mean, I was honest enough to say, I don't know. Gunny, staff sergeant, sergeant, corporal, lance corporal, somebody come and help me, please, because I don't know the answer. But that's okay, because I had experienced Marines who would then come in and say, hey, Captain, this is what we think that. And then I would sit there and think about it and come up with an answer. But what's happening with these Israelis, they don't have that. They don't have 15-year gunnery sergeants. They don't have 10-year staff sergeants. They got 19-year-old sergeants. So what that means is the tasks that would be assigned to these experienced NCOs in the American system have to be assumed by officers. So they have majors, 23-year-old majors, doing the work of a staff sergeant. It's a totally screwed up system where they're officers. They're saying this is the leadership ethic of the Israelis. No, it ain't. It's called stupidity. It's called a conscript army. It's called what happens when you don't have a professional army. And just keep in mind that the vast majority of these Israelis out there fighting are young kids with no military experience. These aren't guys that have been in the military for 10 years, 15 years, who've been there, done it, got a couple T-shirts. These are guys, this is their first experience, and they're not trained well. They didn't go. I saw a comment in there about a guy saying, I lived at, I was stationed at Fort Hood, but I lived at 29 Palms, or he lived at Fort Ord. He talked about Reforger, the reinforcement of forces in Germany. That's an exercise that we did during the Cold War, where we would literally every year, or sometimes twice a year, fly 10,000 soldiers out to join up with pre-positioned equipment. And within less than 12 hours of landing, they were in the field with their equipment going through combat drills, because that's the way we had to fight with the Soviets coming across the border. You had to land, jump in, and go. Be ready to fight now. And the only way you could do that is by training 24/7. You didn't even become good at Reforger. I would ask this guy to ask me that. Were you good the first time you did Reforger? No. Why? Because it was all new. You're going, Christ, this is difficult. I don't understand what's going on. You only became good at Reforger about the fourth time you did it, when you went, okay, I know what to expect. I can anticipate. My brain's not going to get bogged down. I can boom. And suddenly things are working the way they're supposed to work. That was the whole purpose of it. But 4 Reforgers meant that you were in for, 2, 3, 4 years before you became good at it. Israeli conscripts in for 2.5 years, half of that time spent just getting basic training. They aren't good at anything. They're not good at anything. And I'm just saying that with all seriousness. They suck. They're good at beating up girls, beating up 10-year-old boys, breaking arms, shooting old men, but they're not good at war. They're not good at it all. You can't even be good at tank operator. Think about that. Who's driving the damn Merkava tanks? Guys have been driving for 10 years? No, guys that got straight out of armor school, and now they're in a Merkava tank in one of the most demanding environments in the world. They don't know how to use cover. They don't know anything about what they're doing. They're coming in there scared. Bam, they get hit. Now what do? Where's their infantry support? Did they practice that tactic? Half the people out there that have worked with the American tank infantry team knows what happens the first time you go out there and you try to work with the Bradley and dismounted guys. You screw it up badly. You lose every time. Why? Because the enemy's going to kick your ass because you don't know what you're doing. But then you take that loss, you come back and you talk about it, and you say, okay, hey, rather than you guys deploying here and getting overextended and me coming in without you here, okay, we're going to come in. Get that guy deployed first. Okay, you got that field of fire. Come in here, boom. Okay, get the fire suppression down. Okay, now move in. Now do this. Now you're thinking tactically. It takes a long time to do that. These Israelis don't think tactically. Plus, they're emotion driven. When your strategic purpose is to inflict pain on the Palestinians, that's what you're doing. These Israelis are more intent on making TikTok videos showing them desecrating mosques, burning schools, embarrassing, humiliating Palestinian women than they are focused on the actual business of war. If you're not, I was told, I'll just leave this. I had a Marine captain once drive me from, I took a ride from Washington, D.C. back to Quantico. As we're driving there, we're talking, and he's like, you're going to be a career Marine. I'm like, yeah, it looks like it. And he's like, okay, hey, what do you see out here? And I'm driving through in this beautiful land of Northern Virginia. And I went, I don't know, some hills, some town. He goes, you ain't a professional warrior yet. He goes, when you look at that, I want you to see, the best route up the hill, where the covering fire position is. I want you to be looking at, cover, concealment. You have to be thinking this every time you go. We told that same thing with firefighters. I was driving through with my firefighters in town. I'd say, what do you see? Oh, street. And I said, no. You have to see single wall construction. You have to see this. You have to look in there and see the car. Are there children's toys out in the front yard? So if you show up, are there going to be kids in that house? Is there evidence of animals? You got to look at this kind of stuff. When you got to think firefighting. Where's the fire hydrant? What's my best approach so I don't block the ladder coming in? Where are the lines? If you're not thinking like that, you're not a professional. As a Marine, I literally, to this day, I look at everything from a perspective of tactical advantage, operational, logistical sustainability, because I was trained that way. These Israelis, they don't think like that. They don't think like that at all. They're not very good at what they do. And Hamas lured them into a trap of their own making, and Hamas is kicking the living snot out of them.
If you got a couple minutes, you got enough for one more subject? Maybe we'll
do
10 minutes. Okay. Let me share two things with you. Let's look at it. Number one, I'm going to do two. Here's the first one. Breaking. Marianne Williamson claims primaries are rigged, accuses 4 states of bias towards Joe Biden. So what we got is Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Massachusetts. Only Biden's name will appear on the ballot. They will not allow anyone. The Democratic Party has decided those 4 states are Joe Biden's. If Garland Nixon, if Scott Ritter, if somebody who's lived in that state the entire life, if they're beloved by everyone and they say, you know what, I think I want to give it a shot. Sorry, Joe Biden's the only person. It's like we hear about those banana republics. Hey, vote for whoever, and they put one name on the ballot. Now, let's do one other. One more article. All right. Republicans threatened to take Joe Biden off the ballot in states they control, right? And why are they doing that? Because of a Colorado ruling that Donald Trump is not permitted to be on the ballot this year. So what we got is a Democratic Party where Biden, let's face it, he's done. We watched him the other day say that 65 years ago on October 7th, 65 years ago, he said this. I saw the video that Hamas attacked Israel. His father, he literally said, my father went back to the kibbutz to look for his family. His Irish Catholic father, who died 20 years ago, apparently was living in a kibbutz 65 years / days. It was madness. And the Democratic Party has said, in our primaries, you can only vote for this guy. Meanwhile, as far as the Republicans are concerned, Donald Trump, like him, don't like him, it doesn't matter. He has every right. You and I have every right to run. Everybody has every right to run. I'm sorry, if you're a person that wants to vote for Donald Trump, nah, that ain't happening. He ain't on the ballot. To call this a miscarriage of justice is absurd. But it's like I said now, Republicans are saying, and as soon as that happened, I said that we'll take Joe Biden off the ballot in states where they control, which I disagree with all of it, but I predicted that would happen. We now have a Democratic Party that has become, I don't even know what the word for this is, fascism, to say we're going to take people off the ballots, where our own constituents, they can't vote. You want to talk about a banana republic fascist activity? This is about as bad as I've ever seen it. What are your thoughts on this, Scott Ritter?
No, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, it's over for America. We've become a joke, a tragic joke. Democracy is dead. I mean, it works at the local level to an extent, but again, who puts the names on the ballot? Ask yourselves that. I mean, when you go to the poll on election day and you go, okay, here's the name, who put them there? Did you? Or did the Democratic Party pick somebody? Or did the Republic? See, we become so accustomed to, transferring the responsibilities of citizenship to entities that are unelected, and they get to select for us. So when we go to elect, we're going through the process of thinking we're voting and therefore being a good citizen and we have control, but we're just voting for a preordained outcome, one or the other, picked by somebody else that we have no. We're dead as a society. We are done. I believe in the Constitution, and I believe in constitutional processes. And it's illegal to advocate for violent overthrow of the Constitution. It's illegal to do that. But when the Constitution no longer works, when it's become a fraud, when it's become a joke, maybe Thomas Jefferson had it right. I'm not going to repeat his words because I don't want people to get in trouble. You guys can look them up. You know what I'm talking about. The Tree of Liberty. We're headed in the wrong direction. And I don't know what it takes to get the American people to wake up, because it's not just about getting Joe Biden out of office. It's not just about putting Donald Trump or keeping Donald Trump out of office, whatever you want. It's about the system. The system is corrupt. The system is broken. The system is the one that fools us into thinking that this is a democratic institution. We are a joke. literal joke. You know, we go around and we interfere in the electoral processes of other nations and say, well, you don't run elections right. We don't run elections right. Man, there is no singular. We have 50 states that do 50 different things with different ways, and within the states, different things. We don't know how to run an election. Why is it that Iran can tell you the same day who won the election with a very accurate vote count? Why can Iran count votes better than we can? Why can't we count votes? What is it about the American system that has it so that on the day of a national election, we have to wait a week until we find out what vote counted? Guys, it's broken. The system's broken.